Galactic Apocalypse, the Quantum Cataclysm. The Cataclysm. The sky was dark and twisted with smoke, the ground shook with an unrelenting violence, and the world was ending. Citizens of every nation scrambled to find shelter, but it was too late. The planet had been thrown out of balance, and the cataclysm had already begun. In the midst of this chaos, a lone spaceship raced towards the planet. Its engines burned bright as it pierced through the atmosphere, descending towards the surface at a blistering pace. The hull shook violently as it fought against the turbulence, but the pilot fought on. He was the last hope for humanity, and he would not falter. The vessel crash-landed on a barren wasteland, kicking up a cloud of dust and debris that shrouded it from sight. As the dust settled, the pilot emerged. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a determined expression etched into his rugged features. He surveyed the wreckage around him, taking stock of the damage. The ship was a mess, but it had endured the descent better than he could have hoped. He retrieved a small device from his pocket and scanned the area. The readings confirmed his fears. The cataclysm had already begun, and time was running out. Taking a deep breath, the pilot set off towards the nearest settlement. It was a small town, nestled in the crook of a mountain range, and it was his best hope for finding help. As he strode towards the town, he saw the devastation wrought by the cataclysm. Buildings lay in ruins, bodies lay strewn across the ground, and the air was thick with the stench of death. But the pilot did not falter. He pressed on, driven by a sense of duty that burned within him. He knew that he was the only one who could save humanity, and he would stop at nothing to keep them alive. As he entered the town, he was met with a bleak scene. The survivors huddled together in buildings that still stood, their faces etched with fear and despair. They had given up hope, resigned themselves to their fate. But the pilot knew that there was still a chance. He rallied the survivors, outlining his plan to save humanity from the cataclysm. They were hesitant at first, but the pilot's conviction and determination won them over. Together, they set out towards the mountains, determined to find the key to saving their world. The journey was long and perilous. The ground shook beneath their feet, storms raged around them, and monsters lurked in the darkness. But the pilot and his companions were undaunted. They pushed on, driven by the knowledge that their mission was the only thing that could save humanity. Finally, they reached their destination, a hidden laboratory tucked away in the heart of the mountains. It was the only place where they could hope to find a solution to the cataclysm, and the pilot wasted no time in entering. For hours, he pored over data, running simulations, and testing theories. The other survivors watched as he worked, their hope rising with each passing minute. Finally, the pilot emerged, his face alight with triumph. He had found the solution to the cataclysm. Together, they rallied the survivors once again, and set out to implement the pilot's plan. The ground shook beneath their feet, the sky turned dark, but they knew that they were the last hope for humanity. As they worked, the pilot knew that the fate of the world rested on their shoulders. But he was undaunted. He had faced the cataclysm head-on, stared death in the face, and emerged victorious. And he knew that no matter what came next, he would always be ready for it. The quantum anomaly. The pilot had saved humanity from the cataclysm, but he knew that their troubles were far from over. As he and the other survivors worked to rebuild their world, he sensed that something was wrong. A disturbance in the fabric of reality, a ripple in the quantum realm. He was not sure what it meant, but he knew that it was dangerous. And so he set out to investigate, leaving the other survivors behind to continue their work. He journeyed far and wide, using his ship to travel through space and time. He consulted with the greatest minds in the universe, studied ancient texts and experimental research. And all the while, the anomaly grew stronger. It was tearing apart the universe, opening up rifts that bled chaos and destruction. And the pilot knew that if he did not find a way to stop it, everything he had fought for would be for naught. That's when he found her, a scientist, a genius, and a rebel. She was holed up in an abandoned laboratory, surrounded by failed experiments and discarded theories. She had been studying the anomaly for months, working to decipher its secrets and unlock its power. The pilot approached her, drawn by her intellect and her drive. She was wary at first, but he managed to convince her that he was on her side. Together, they delved into the anomaly, probing for weakness and searching for clues. Their journey led them to strange worlds, each one more dangerous than the last. They fought off monsters, dodged traps, and solved riddles. And all the while, the pilot and the scientist grew closer, their bond forged in the fires of danger and determination. Finally, they reached the heart of the anomaly. It was a swirling vortex of energy, a nexus of reality that defied all understanding. But the pilot and the scientist were determined to unravel its mysteries, and they plunged into the heart of the anomaly with abandon. What they found there shook them to their core. The anomaly was not merely a disturbance in the quantum realm, it was a weapon. A weapon forged by a malevolent force, intent on using it to destroy the universe. The pilot and the scientist knew that they were outmatched. But they refused to give up. Together, they used their combined intellect and unbreakable will to turn the tables on their foe. The battle was long and intense. Reality itself shook and groaned under the weight of their struggle. But in the end, the pilot and the scientist emerged victorious. They had harnessed the power of the anomaly and turned it against their foe. And with the threat of destruction averted, the pilot and the scientist emerged from the anomaly, hand in hand. They had saved the universe, and in the process, they had found each other. As they flew back to their world, the pilot knew that the anomaly had changed him. He was no longer just a hero, he was a man in love. And he knew that with the scientist by his side, there was nothing he could not accomplish. The enemy within the pilot had saved humanity from the cataclysm and averted the destruction of the universe, but he knew that there would always be another threat. And he was right. As he settled back into his role as a leader for the people, he became aware of a sinister presence lurking within their midst. It was an enemy that could not be seen or touched, but one that could manipulate and control. The pilot knew that this enemy was dangerous beyond measure. It was a parasite, feeding on the fears and doubts of the survivors, spreading its influence like a virus. And if it was not stopped, it would destroy everything the pilot had fought for. He knew that the enemy was embedded deep within the survivors, but he could not pinpoint its exact location or source. He tried to reach out to the other leaders of the world, but they were too consumed by their own struggles to listen. The pilot realized that he was on his own. But he was not fazed. He had faced impossible odds before, and he would do so again. He gathered a team of the bravest, most intelligent minds he could find from among the survivors, and set out to hunt the enemy. Day and night, they scoured the cities and towns, searching for any sign of the enemy's influence. And as they dug deeper, they realized the truth. The enemy was more insidious than they could have imagined. They found signs of it in the populace, in the ways people turned against each other, in the lies and deceit that permeated the air. They traced it back to individuals, families, and groups who had been consumed by the enemy's power. And they knew that they had to act quickly, before it was too late. The pilot and his team gathered intel, making a list of everyone who showed signs of infection. They began to track them, following them wherever they went and analyzing their every move. And as they did so, they uncovered the enemy's ultimate plan. The enemy was not content with merely infecting the survivors. It wanted to wipe them out. And it had already set its wheels in motion, planting bombs and setting traps all around their world. And worse yet, the people who had been infected with the enemy's power were willing accomplices in their own demise. The pilot and his team knew that they had to act fast. They detonated the bombs, setting off a chain reaction that destroyed the enemy's plans. They tracked down the infected individuals, using whatever means necessary to root out the enemy's hold. And in the end, they emerged victorious. The pilot had saved his people once again. But he knew that the enemy would always be lurking, waiting to strike again. And he was ready for it. He had seen the worst that the universe could throw at him, and he was still standing. The pilot would continue to lead his people, fighting against the evils that threatened their world. And he would never falter. The quantum conspiracy with the threat of the enemy within extinguished, the pilot thought that the survivors could finally rest easy. But he was wrong. He sensed a disturbance in the quantum realm once again, a ripple in reality that was not of his making. And it was not just one anomaly this time, it was a cascade of them, all occurring at the same moment. The pilot knew that something was wrong. He knew that the universe was being tampered with, and he had to get to the root of the problem before it was too late. He assembled a team of his best and brightest, and set out to investigate. They traveled to the edges of the universe, probing its deepest secrets, and piecing together the clues that would lead them to the conspiracy at the root of the quantum anomalies. What they found there shook them to the core. The conspiracy was vast, spanning worlds and galaxies, and it was driven by a malevolent force that sought to control reality itself. The conspirators were ruthless, willing to do anything to achieve their goals, and they had already made great strides in reshaping the universe to their will. The pilot and his team knew that they were outmatched. But they would not give up. They dug deeper, and with each revelation, they found a new roadblock that they had to overcome. The pilot realized that the conspiracy had infiltrated every sector of the universe. The leaders they had trusted were just puppets, controlled by the conspirators. The scientists and intellectuals had been silenced, or worse, co-opted to work for the conspiracy. The pilot and his team knew that they had to act fast. They realized that they were up against a vast machine, and the only way to stop it was to find its source. They traveled to the very heart of the universe, to the place where reality began. They encountered the conspirators themselves, a group of beings so powerful that their mere presence altered the fabric of the universe. The pilot and his team fought on, daring to stand up to such immense power. They battled the conspirators with every ounce of strength they had, utilizing the knowledge and the skill that they had gained on their journey. In the end, the pilot and his team emerged victorious. But the pilot knew that the conspiracy was too vast for them to entirely eradicate. He knew that the universe would always be in danger. But he wasn't afraid. The pilot knew that he had gained something even more powerful than knowledge or skill. He had gained a deep and unshakable understanding of what it meant to be a hero. And the pilot knew that as long as there was evil in the universe, he would be there to stand against it, to fight it, and to defeat it. The universe would always be in danger, but it would always have its champion to protect it. Betrayal. The pilot thought that he had seen the worst that the universe could throw at him. But he was wrong. He was about to face his toughest challenge yet, betrayal. The pilot and his team had been working tirelessly to keep the universe safe, task after task, crisis after crisis. It was tiring work, but they never faltered. One day, they received a distress call from one of the far-flung outposts of the universe. It was garbled and unintelligible, but the pilot and his team knew that they had to check it out. When they arrived, they found that the outpost had been destroyed, the buildings were in ruins, the land was a smoldering wasteland, and there was no sign of life. As they searched for survivors, the pilot and his team were ambushed. The assailants were not just regular assailants, they were some of the greatest minds and heroes of the universe, working together to take the pilot down. The pilot realized that he had been set up. The distress call was a trap, designed to lure him and his team into the open so that they could be taken down. The pilot and his team fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. They were imprisoned, stripped of their armor and weapons, and forced to face their captors in a cruel and twisted game. Their captors were using them as pawns, forcing them to play a deadly game of strategy and willpower. As they played round after round, the pilot and his team realized that they were not only fighting for their lives, but for the very fate of the universe. The game was fraught with danger. Each round was a matter of life and death. The pilot watched as his team members were taken out one by one, until he was the last one standing. The final battle was the toughest of all. The pilot knew that he was facing some of the greatest minds of the universe, but he refused to give up. He used all the skills that he had acquired, all the knowledge that he had gained, and all the wisdom that he possessed to outthink and outmaneuver his captors. In the end, the pilot emerged victorious. But he knew that the betrayal that he had faced was a reminder that there would always be those who would seek to take advantage of him to betray and destroy. The pilot knew that he had to be vigilant, to choose his alliances wisely, and to always be ready for whatever the universe threw at him. He knew that he could never let his guard down, and that in a world where even his closest friends and allies could turn against him, he had to be his own greatest protector. But deep down, the pilot knew that he was not alone. He had the universe by his side, and he knew that as long as he had its people's trust, he had the power and the strength to face anything that the universe had to throw at him. The final battle, after facing betrayal and emerging victorious, the pilot thought that he had seen the worst that the universe could throw at him. But he was wrong. The worst was yet to come. The pilot received a message that shook him to his core. It was from a being so powerful that it made his most powerful enemies seem like mere mortal beings. A being that had been created from the very essence of the universe, a being that was the universe's personification. The being warned the pilot that the universe was once again in danger, but that this time it was not from any enemy or conspiracy. It was from a force that was beyond anything that the pilot had ever faced before. The universe was being threatened by an entity that had been created from the very void of nothingness, a being that was the embodiment of destruction itself. And it was heading straight towards the universe, seeking to destroy everything in its path. The pilot knew that he had to act fast. He assembled his team and set out to confront the entity. But as they approached the entity, they realized the terrible truth behind it. The entity was not acting out of malice or a desire to destroy. It was merely following its nature, the nature of the void that it had come from. The pilot and his team knew that they had to act fast. They realized that the only way to stop the entity was to create a force that was stronger than destruction, a force that could counteract the force of the void. They gathered the greatest minds of the universe, working together to create a power that could stand up against the void. They worked tirelessly, day and night, piecing together the fragments of the universe and working to create a force of their own. The pilot himself was at the head of the operation, utilizing all of his knowledge, skill, and strength to create a power that was beyond anything any mortal being had ever created. As the entity drew closer to the universe, the pilot and his team wielded their newfound power, unleashing a wave of energy that was so powerful that it set the entity reeling. The entity fought back with all its might, but it was no match for the combined power of the universe itself. The entity was pushed back, repulsed by the force that the pilot and his team had created. The pilot watched as the entity was driven away, disappearing into the void from which it had come. And as he looked out over the universe that he had come to call his own, he realized the true nature of his existence. He realized that he was more than just a pilot, more than just a champion. He was a protector, a defender, and a hero. He had faced down the greatest threats the universe had to offer, time and time again, and he had emerged victorious. The pilot knew that the universe would always be in danger, but he also knew that he would always be there to protect it. He knew that as long as there were beings who needed protection, who needed someone to stand up for them, he would be there. And with that thought in mind, the pilot stood tall, gazing out over the universe that he had worked so hard to protect. He knew that he had truly become the greatest hero that the universe had ever seen. The end. The aftermath. The pilot had faced down the greatest threats that the universe had to offer, and emerged victorious. He had seen the best and worst of the universe, and had come to understand that the balance between them was what kept the universe ticking. Now, with the immediate danger out of the way, the pilot found himself reflecting on the aftermath. He saw how the universe had been forever changed by the crises that he had faced, the tragedies, the losses, and the gains. He realized that the universe would never be the same again. It had been altered irrevocably by all that had happened. But it wasn't all bad. The pilot saw how the crises and dangers had brought the universe together. How they had galvanized the people of the universe, made them stronger, kinder, and more willing to work together. The pilot saw how people had come together, always willing to help, always willing to lend a hand. He saw how they had faced their demons, fought their fears, and emerged as something greater than themselves. He saw how the pilots and heroes he had worked alongside had become legends in their own right. Their bravery, their tenacity, and their determination had become the stuff of myth and legend, inspiring generations to come. And the pilot himself had changed. He had come to understand the true meaning of heroism, not just being able to punch harder or fly faster, but putting everything on the line to protect others, no matter the cost. The pilot realized that he had become something more than just a champion. He had become a symbol of hope, of light, and of the power of good. He had become something that people looked up to, something that gave them the strength to go on, even in the darkest of times. The pilot saw that the universe had changed, but he knew that the change was for the better. He knew that the universe was stronger, kinder, and more resilient than it had ever been before. And with that thought in mind, the pilot looked out over the universe one last time, taking in all that he had accomplished, all that he had fought for, and all that he had become. He knew that he had truly become the greatest hero the universe had ever seen, but he also knew that he wasn't the only one. He knew that there were countless others out there, working tirelessly to protect the universe, to keep it safe, to keep it alive. And with that thought in mind, the pilot smiled, knowing that the universe was in good hands and that he had played his part in making it so.